Hello, welcome to the June meeting where I will be discussing the luminous spider worms of New Zealand. That is exactly what the name translates as, so we'll be demonstrating. But first off, I can expound a bit on the bioluminescence in animals anyway, and other organisms. There are quite a lot of different species on Earth that can produce cold light, highly efficient production of particular wavelengths. A lot of these live in the ocean, but you also get quite a few on land. You of course have many species of bioluminescent bacteria and single-celled organisms. There are bioluminescent fungi. It is possible that bioluminescence originally evolved as a way for cells to deal with free radicals building up in their cytoplasm, because free radicals are quite damaging to the cellular machinery, and turning that sort of chemical energy into light is a good way to deal with this efficiently and rapidly. The actual mechanism of bioluminescence uses two different classes of chemicals called luciferins and luciferases. The luciferins are the chemicals that the enzymes, the luciferases, break down to release the chemical energy as light. However, there's not just one kind of luciferin. Pretty much every group of bioluminescent organisms that they've looked at has a different luciferin and luciferase pairing, and they produce different wavelengths of light. For example, in the insects, there are what are called glowworms in the northern hemisphere usually. They are not worms. They are not the glowworms I'll be talking about. They are in fact the larvae and the larvae-like adult females of certain beetles in 4 different families, including of course the famous fireflies. We do get some firefly species in Australia. The 4 different families of firefly beetles, they produce light that can be green, yellow or red, sometimes all 3 on one species, as is the case with this particular larva here. And they use that luminescence both as to warn nocturnal predators that they taste absolutely foul, most of them do, and to signal to potential mates when they're adults, or indeed to lure males of other species in to be eaten in some species. So those are the glowworms that you're most familiar from the Europe, the UK and North America. Not the ones I'm going to be talking about tonight. Neither are these, which not only are they not insects, they're millipedes, and these ones live in North America in the mountains of California. There's a couple of different species, and we're fairly sure that the reasons that these ones glow is to warn predators that they produce cyanide. So anything that comes across them at night gets an ample warning not to do that. They generally glow this rather interesting green. So that's the reason they glow in the dark. Then if we push on to one particularly unusual bioluminescent insect is this species of cockroach. However, this species has only ever been collected once, and that was about 50 years ago, and has never been seen since because the only volcano it's ever been found on blew up. So it's possibly extinct.
Mount St. Helens or something?
No, it's in Indonesia. If I am blanking on the exact location, but since it's probably extinct, it probably doesn't matter. But the species that I'm going to be talking about mostly this evening is the luminous spider worm itself, Arachnocantha luminosa. This is the New Zealand glowworm as an adult. They are one of the pteroplatid flies. There are 3 or 4, depending on what taxonomy you're using, families of flies known as fungus gnats. This is one of those families of fungus gnats. As you may guess, most of them feed on fungus as larvae. They are not particularly large or agile flies. The adults are generally quite short-lived. But in the case of this particular species, the adults only live about 4 days at best, which is one of the reasons that the Cheroplatids are not very well studied, because the adults are not around for long at all. So it makes it quite difficult to get them under your microscope and get proper descriptions of all the anatomical details and describe them.
Do they have functional mouth parts?
I do not believe they do, no. When the glowworms, hang on, have I?
Grim existence, isn't it?
It is pretty grim, yes. Of course, the Maori were, of course, immediately aware of them and included the details in their mythology, which we'll get to. But once Europeans arrived in New Zealand and noticed them, they initially thought that they were related to the glowworm beetles of Europe. And it wasn't until they're actually captured and reared to adulthood that they can identify these aren't beetles, they're fungus gnats. And George Vernon Hudson was not the first person to rear them to adulthood, but he was the first person to rear them to adulthood and then send them to an actual entomologist, a proper description. George Vernon Hudson is also best known for inventing daylight saving, so he'd have more time to go to collect insects after work.
Sounds fair.
So that's it, yes. So this is the guy that invented daylight saving, just so you could go out after work for more time to collect insects.
But it's just dark to see the glowing ones. So.
Apparently, but yes.
Welcome.
So, yes, to prove that they were fungus gnats and not beetles. In that illustration there, you got the adults, of course. You also have the larva, and you have the pupa attached to the silk lines to the roof of the cave.
Even I can tell that's not a beetle.
The New Zealand glowworm is found over most of the main islands of New Zealand and on Stewart Island down the bottom there. It would once have had a much wider range in New Zealand before everything from there to there got cleared for agriculture, and the North Island as well, because the larvae require high levels of moisture, sheltered positions. They don't like rapid changes in temperature, so they require, at best, dense forest with lots of rain. So these days on the South Island, you've certainly got lots of rain on the west coast, so they're thriving there. On the 3 trips that Desiree and I have done to New Zealand, we've seen the glowworms in 4 places. Desiree saw them at Waitomo, which is about there, in the Waitomo caves. On this trip, we saw them in Dunedin, at Tianau, and at Fox Glacier. So we'll cover that in a bit detail as I get to the photos that we took. But of course, it's not the adults that are the thing that's most interesting about the glowworms. It is the larvae. The names in Te Reo Maori reference the fact that they're usually seen reflected in water because they like living in places that have high humidity, usually near running water or pools or in water-filled caves. The mythology is that the glowworms were the first life and the first light after the creation of life by the creator deities. So these would have been the first things to start glowing after the creation of living things in the universe in the local mythology. They, as you can see in this case, they set up their colonies on overhangs and the roofs of caves, and I'll show you a few other examples in later photos. And then they lower down these many strands of silk, which I'll also explain in more detail when we get to some of their close-ups. Yes, and as I said, they are some of the most incredible tourist attractions in New Zealand. So, right, but that of course is the ones in the caves. How do they get from cave to cave? It's because they don't just live in the caves. Caves are ideal for them because they got the constant humidity and temperature, and they're usually very wet. But they also live out in the forests, underneath fallen trees, on overhanging banks, in the root masses of trees that have fallen over. For example, this is one of the photos that I took at the Fox Glacier Glowworm Forest, which is literally one step away from the edge of the Fox Glacier Township. At the top right up there, you can see some stars and the air glow. That's that pink spot. And all those blue spots underneath are the glowworms that are in the roots of a fallen tree in the glowworm forest. It was a fairly remarkable thing to see, as you can imagine. And so they would have been living all through the wet forests of New Zealand before most of them were cleared, anywhere that had the overhang and the moisture that they need. But if you don't want to go over to Fox Glacier, you can just go to Dunedin, because 10 minutes drive from the middle of Dunedin, you've got Nichols Creek, which also has glowworms, where you've got permanently drenched overhanging sides of the gorge, and the glowworms have set up shop on the overhangs there. They're bright enough that you can see them glowing on the far side of the stream about 20 metres away. This was the first time I've ever seen glowworms, and there was a certain amount of delighted laughter from me just to encounter them. And the other location we saw them on this trip was at Aotearoa, particularly at the Aurora caves on the far side of the lake from the township there. These caves go back for more than a kilometre into the mountains of Fiordland, but the glowworms only live in this section down here, and for a couple of months each year the access to the cave is entirely blocked off because the water level from the river running through it rises high enough that it fills the entrance of the cave. So they're stuck in there for months, just feeding on any aquatic insects that have come up the stream into the cave and emerged and then immediately get eaten by the glowworms. That included stoneflies. While we were there, we saw a couple of actual stoneflies that had emerged from the water and are waiting to close from their from nymphs to adults and so forth. They're doomed. They're surrounded by ravenous glowworms. And
Do you see them walking around or crawling around?
I didn't see the glowworms moving around, and the stoneflies were just waiting to emerge as winged adults. They weren't moving around much either, but they were there on the walls of the cave, having no idea what was coming for them. Right, and what was coming for them is, of course, the reason that their scientific name translates as the luminous spider worms. Each of these larvae is lowering long strings of silk dotted with bubbles, dropsillets of sticky mucus. And this is a death trap for any flying insects that have mistaken them for the stars of the night sky, as with the photograph I showed you from Fox Glacier. Because any insect flying into the caves and sees what appears to be open sky above is going to fly up and either get caught in these sticky traps, or in the webs of the spiders that set up their webs in front of the glowworm colonies to catch any insects that are on their way to their own deaths. So I got a close up.
It's the reason I don't like caves.
Oh yeah, well that's probably the other thing with the Aotearoa. Let's go back to the entrance to the Aotearoa caves there is low enough that I needed to get down on all fours to get through the entrance, despite the footpath that they've set up. And once they put us in the boat, push us into the glowworm grotto, I was banging my head on the roof of the cave, despite the fact that I was sitting in the bottom of the boat. So just while I had a woolly hat on.
Did you get to see any of the cave wetter?
No. I have gone to a couple of places in New Zealand looking for a cave wetter, including the McCluggage Tunnel, which was dug through a mountain on the North Island because the local mill owner was getting too annoyed having to walk around the mountain, so dug through it instead. But no, I went there looking for cave wetter, but instead I found a giant harvestman about the size of the palm of my hand, so that was nice.
Yeah. No, the wetter are cool.
They are.
Lots of legs.
So are the giant harvestmen, because the harvestmen in question have got gigantic chelicerae, or at least the males do, that the males use for competition for access to females. So they chelicerae about just out to the elbow is longer than their entire body, and then folds back down to the mouth as well. So they're incredibly lopsided looking animals.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes. And all right, this is the structure of the trap. There are two. There's one of the maggots there. They make a silken hammock that they move around on as they lay their trap lines and react to anything that's got caught in the glue, because they can feel the vibrations of something that's caught and struggled, and then they can reel the entire string in seconds, and then get to work eating whatever unfortunate insects got caught. They'll wrap it in more silk and mucus first, then try and find a thin place in the exoskeleton, usually the eyes, and then get chewing. And as you can see, because they are lowering the string lines, they need an overhang to work from, otherwise the string lines are going to get caught on the walls of the stone. And because there are only so many places where you've got the ideal wetness and overhang and stand still conditions, they are highly territorial. If another one of the glowworms tries to move into the territory of a existing trap setup, the resident glowworm will react violently, and if the other glowworm keeps trying, will get eaten. So the glowworms are cannibalistic if pushed. They're also cannibalistic of their own adults, because when the adults hatch, they also mistake the lights overhead for stars and can get caught in their own offspring's traps.
I see a horror movie coming on here.
Eat
Yes.
my son.
So this next one should autoplay. There we go. This is sped up a bit, but you can see them moving around their traps, maintaining the silk, adding new lines, reacting to things that they're caught. And you'll also note that these are all blue. With the firefly larvae at the start, red, orange and yellow lights, but the cheiroplatid fungus gnats all produce a very specific blue light, and they're unique amongst land animals for doing so. They're producing the light from their Malpighian tubules, which are the insect equivalent of kidneys. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. I think I've read it. I've never heard it said before. And because the tubules are pretty much the only part of the insect's anatomy that don't get completely rearranged in metamorphosis, the pupa are also faintly bioluminescent, and so are the adults. So they're still producing the light even after they've pupated and emerged as an adult. The other thing is that they're actually watching what their neighbours are doing, so they'll synchronise the brightness of their displays. When they see their neighbours starting to glow brighter, they'll increase the brilliance of their own luminosity to match. So they're getting a more effective light display at once. But it's also one of the reasons why they don't let you take photographs. There's not flash photography and that in the TNL caves, is because if there's too much light around, they'll stop producing the light entirely. There's no point, because producing the luciferin and the luciferases is biochemically very energy intensive, so they don't want to waste the effort if there's too much light already around. And of course, it affects your own night vision, so if you've got the lights going. Let's see. More of the same. So yeah, they are a truly extraordinary display, and definitely worth seeing if you can get over to New Zealand and see some of the glowworm displays in the caves. But you've got options. Right.
So the larvae have functional eyes?
Yeah.
And that's how they detect each other?
Yep, they've got very sensitive touch and enough eyesight that they can see what their neighbours are doing with their displays. So, right, and I've got a photo here of one of the adults emerging from its pupa. The pupa are hung on a silk line from the roof of the cave. Not a very safe place to do that when you're surrounded by cannibalistic siblings and whatnot, but it seems to work for them. And as I said, the adults are very short-lived, 4 days at best, which makes it quite difficult to study them. It's also pretty difficult to set up a enclosure to rear them in captivity because it needs the right humidity, it needs the right temperatures, and of course you've then got to try to get food in that to them. So, but it can be done, as George Hudson proved when he reared them to adulthood and sent them to Australia for proper description. But that is the New Zealand glowworms. They're not the only species of Arachnocampa. There are in fact 8 other species here in Australia and some very strange records up in Borneo that I'm a bit puzzled by. But the species in Australia are much more geographically limited. For example, there's Arachnocampa tropica, which only lives in far north Queensland. There's also a species in Victoria that's only known from one cave on one mountain. So the ones here in Australia, all on the east coast, where you've got the wetter forests. But there's a couple of places near Sydney that you can go to see them if you're over there. Some of the best places to see them would be in the abandoned railway tunnels in the Blue Mountains and whatnot, such as the Helensburgh tunnel in Illawarra. Once they stopped using the tunnels for getting to, in this case I believe it was shale that they were collecting on the far side of the mountain there, and the track was closed down, the glowworms probably moved in. And that's not the only railway tunnel in New South Wales that the glowworms have moved into. And the Arachnocampa is not, in fact, the only species of Ceraplatid that produces light. For example, Ophelia fultoni, also known as the Dismalite, because they originally recorded from Dismal Creek. These don't live in caves, they live in crevices in the ground and emerge at night to spin the webs and catch prey as large as cockroaches. And unlike the Arachnocampa, these guys have lanterns at the head and the tail that aren't in the Malpighian tubules. They're just using different body parts but the same bioluminescence. But the weird thing is that they're not just carnivores. Most of their diet appears to be fungal spores. So these guys are found in North America, in the Appalachians, and some of the other cooler, wetter forests there. There's also been a species that's recently been discovered in Brazil, which is just in 2019 in the Atlantic Rainforests Reserve near Sao Paulo. These have 2 lanterns up near the head, but they're again blue. These guys appear to have the very similar biochemistry to the Dismalites as far as the actual chemical structure of the luciferin and the luciferases go. And they also appear to be mixed carnivores and fungal feeders. They're also the first insect found in the neotropics that makes blue bioluminescence. And there's also Ceraplatys niponicus, which is found in Japan. You can guess from the binomial. It's found in Japan and in adjacent parts of the Far East. This one lives in the same sort of hammocks on the underside of shelf fungi on trees. And we have no idea why they produce blue light, because these ones exclusively feed on fungal spores. So they're not using that to trap insect prey, but they glow anyway. They may be advertising the fact that they're poisonous to eat. The silkers apparently contain high levels of oxalic acid, so they may be discouraging people from any predators from taking a bite at night. But yet again, the same blue light that the carnivorous glowworms produce. And that is the end of the slideshow. Do I have any questions, please?
Do they continue studying the light, or do they go on and off like a firefly?
No, they can change the level of light that they're producing. And if there's too much ambient light, for example, from headlamps or camera flashes, they'll turn their lights off. But they don't flash the lights. No, it's more a continuous glow. It's not exactly clear how they control the light levels either. So, but yes.
How long is the life cycle overall if the adults only live for 4 years?
If they're feeding well, they can go through an entire life cycle in a couple of months on average. The populations in the Aotearoa caves, for example, builds up over the season when the caves actually open, and then the population plummets again when the cave's sealed off because there's no food, well, not much food getting in there. But also because they like living in cool locations too, they can be relatively long lifespans compared to many other insects because they like the cooler.
I'm assuming they can withstand freezing temperatures.
Not really, no. Freezing would be too much. So that's one of the reasons you find them inside the caves and overhangs and whatnot. They can actually retreat into shelter. They need the sheltered conditions to also keep out of the wind because the wind will dry out their mucus traps.
Are there certain depths of the caves they're not found at? Is there a point where it's
At till now, they're only found in the first couple of 100 metres of the cave. Further back than that, there's even less access for prey to get into, despite the fact that the cave goes back well over a kilometre further. But the glowworms are only found in the first section of the cave.
A couple of questions. First of all, was that the Caraplatidae, was that originally a subfamily in Mycetophilidae, which are the better known fungus gnats?
Very likely. Like I said, the taxonomy of the fungus gnats keeps getting changed. In fact, there was another family of fungus gnats that got folded into a subfamily of the Caraplatids in the last few years as well. So at the moment, the taxonomy of the fungus gnats is still being juggled.
Okay, yeah, so very interesting that Sydney one, which is so close to the probably to Sydney, it still hasn't got a name yet. The other question was, what's the biggest? I was surprised to hear that stoneflies could be caught, so I would have thought they were quite large insects.
Yeah.
So what's the maximum size of the prey that they catch, the ones in New Zealand?
Well, the stoneflies they were catching at Tia now were about that long, so they can they're dropping multiple trap lines. So blunders into one, it gets caught on the others as well, and then it gets hauled up and mobilised with the silk, and then eaten alive. So they can definitely handle fully grown stoneflies. They probably couldn't handle a dragonfly, but the dragonflies wouldn't be flying into the caves at night anyway. So, was there another question over there? Nope.
No, I'm just looking at the mouth parts on the harvestman you mentioned.
Ah. Okay. But yeah, they don't have particularly large mouth parts as larvae. Basically, they are trying to find somewhere where the exoskeleton is thin on their prey. Then that's usually the eyes. So they'll start on the eyes, then chew their way into the body.
How big is the adult?
About 1 centimetre long. So they're not large insects. The fungus gnats tend not to be. The better known ones are well under 1 centimetre long. So, but yeah, when you've got a all meat diet, they can get to a larger size than the fungi, I suppose, than the fungus eating ones, I suppose. Any other questions?
So that adults don't show the bioluminescence?
Yeah, the adults are faintly bioluminescent, but it doesn't seem to do anything for them. They don't seem to use it for sexual signalling. It just seems to be a holdover from the fact that their kidneys still glow.
Do you have a
the reproduction of them? Do you know how the reproduction of them works?
Yeah, the eggs are actually quite large, so they don't lay too many eggs compared to other insects, and they're glued in a sticky mass to the wall of the cave or on an overhang or the underside of a tree. So,
A season or daylight, or I know they're in the dark all the time. Is there a pattern, a seasonal pattern within the life cycle?
it is seasonal. It depends on what the conditions are like. They like the cooler, wetter weather, obviously. So they're going to be more of them in spring and autumn than in summer. So yeah, climate change is going to be a problem for them in the Waitomo caves. It is. I saw them on her first trip. The conditions in the caves are highly unusual compared to the other glowworm caves in New Zealand. But that's because since the caves are opened up for the public, they've now got a constant flow of air running through the cave, so that could well affect populations inside the cave. They no longer have these still constant cool temperatures down there. So,
In the days when there were koalas in the southwest, do you think it would be possible that these used to be in the limestone caves of the deep southwest?
okay. Yeah. Well, given how many species we've still got along the east coast, it wouldn't surprise me at all that when in Australia where it's cooler and wetter, that you would have had a lot more species or range of existing species across the continent and so forth. But since it becomes so dry, they can't maintain the wet mucus that they need for their traps to work in most circumstances. I mean, even our caves in Western Australia are generally a lot drier than the ones in New Zealand, where, for example, in Fiordland, where the Tinau and Fox Glacier are, you're getting up to 12 metres of rain in a year, and on some occasions 50 centimetres of rain in a day. So the moisture is not a problem for them there. Any other questions? No?
And the total life cycle, what is that?
A couple of months at the outside.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're longer lived than some insects their size, but that's because they like cooler conditions than many insects do. So
So the flies don't go out when they adult, they stay in the cave.
well, if they're inside the caves, if they can find a way out, they probably would, because you've got the populations out in the forests and open gorges and whatnot. But if they're in the cave, they've got the same problem that other flying insects would have, is that what looks like the sky is actually a death trap.
Yeah,
So
we got the ones in those train tunnels, so they would have flown from
yeah,
somewhere.
they would have been living in the same sort of wet sclerophyll forest underneath fallen trees on the overhanging riverbanks and rock walls and whatnot, and then the humans have come along and built this perfect habitat for them, and they've all moved in.
Yeah.
So the in Australian insects, do they have also the same, the silk hanging down there?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's the
So what's your thoughts about the Borneo outlier?
it's possible it's another Ceraplatid. It was definitely down as a ID'd as Arachnocampa, but I cannot find any references to an Arachnocampa species known from Borneo. There was multiple records in a strip along the edge of the border with Brunei. I think it's Brunei there. But yeah, that's they've apparently been ID'd as Arachnocampa. But as I showed you at the end there are also species of Ceraplatus in the same family that produce the blue luminescence. So it's possible it's actually another Ceraplatid species that's just been mistaken as Arachnocampa. So a slightly puzzling record there.
There is a stigmoderine jewel beetle. Now, stigmoderine jewel beetles are by far our biggest subfamily of jewel beetles. The most remote species is on Mount Kinabalu.
Yep, Mount Kinabalu is a fairly amazing mountain, that's for sure. And we've been forgetting to pass the microphone around.
Yeah.
Where's Mount Kilimanjaro? Is that?
Middle of Borneo, so you get an enormous mountain.
Sabah.
So
Northern Sabah.
yeah, it's
Been there a number of times.
the-
Fantastic.
It really is. So the way that the rainforest changes to more open forest, and then eventually when you get to the top to bare rock,
Yeah.
so as you're climbing the mountain, you get completely different biomes on
Yeah.
the way up and down. And there's some amazing diversity of the Nepenthes pitcher plants on the mountain as well. So I believe there's at least one of the ones on Kinabalu that is fertilised by tree shrews it uses as a toilet.
Yeah, that's right.
So-
What?
The tree shrews use the bowl of the pitcher plant as a toilet. They'll actually go to the plant, perch themselves on the lip,
That's perfect.
So yeah. So it doesn't need to catch insects because the tree shrews are bringing the fertiliser to it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, an amazing place. If you
Yeah.
can get to it, then go. So
Flush
Yeah.
toilets?
it does have a U-bend.
It's a drop toilet.
That's right.
Any other questions? No. Okay. In that case, we can switch over to your photos and see if we can ID some stuff, and then we'll see if anything showed up to the light up. All right.